Hi, and welcome to You're Gonna Love This, the TEG podcast with a very sexy European twist. I'm your co-host, Dustin Robinson, a half-Dutch, half-American guy based in Amsterdam.
And I'm Laurine Flavigny, a very Frenchy French based in Nantes.
We have a great show for you today. We are doing a deep dive, one topic this time, into sovereignty.
Yes.
European tech sovereignty and why everybody is talking about it. It's going into some bad things, some good things, and a little bit of optimism.
Good,
I'm
the
excited.
bad, and the ugly. Yes.
The good, the bad, and the ugly. Let's go.
Let's go.
We've been preparing this episode for a while because
Yes.
we've been closely following the entire situation around Greenland. We've talked about it in previous episodes where there have been threats from Donald Trump leading the U.S. government to somehow take Greenland.
Yes.
That crisis appears to be averted
For now. Yeah.
But I think this crisis shines a light on what is a pretty scary time.
It was. I mean, it still is a pretty scary time, to be honest. But definitely that prompted some more discussions, some big discussions about European sovereignty on several aspects, including the technical one.
Yeah, because I think the core theme that has been floating in the back of everybody's minds is, could the US suddenly just hit the switch and turn everything off in Europe?
Technically, they could, because we are over-relying on US providers and China's providers as well, but a lot of the US providers for several types of architecture and infrastructure, including very critical one, like government services, banking, healthcare. We're not just talking about you're going to lose your access to TikTok.
And how dependent is Europe on the US?
So,
How bad is it if they were to do this crazy thing and hit the switch?
So, get ready for some data. So, according to Euronews, great website, actually, great media.
Quick plug for Euronews.
Yes.
I only discovered this doing deep research in a couple of different LLMs. It is a fantastic news source with a really strong European focus and tons of data.
Very interesting one. According to Euronews, what is the highest reliance on US tech companies? First of all, we have Iceland, Norway, Ireland, Finland, and Sweden, with more than 90% of their companies relying on American tech today for cloud services.
90?
Yes, 90.
That's a lot.
In the UK, 94% of tech companies and 95% of banking and telecom use US cloud services. So in France, it's slightly better, just slightly. We have 66% of French businesses relying on US providers, but with 70% of critical infrastructure providers depending on US email services. So let's just say it's not a great picture today.
No. And so hitting that switch could be quite bad.
Yes.
Because essentially, even if some of these US companies didn't want to do it, the government could force them. So as we're talking about this, we're not trying to portray every US company or its employees as bad, but just if the government was going to force them to do it, they probably would.
They wouldn't have much of a choice.
Yeah. And I think this possibility with Greenland, plus some other things, causes, like I said, things to be very scary. And to be honest, for the United States to be what I would call a very scary ally right now.
Yes.
So we're going to talk about some geopolitics stuff. We are going to come back to the tech stuff, but unfortunately, we have to talk about this stuff a lot. And when I've been thinking about this, I've broken it down myself into what I view as the darkness and the light. So this first part is the darkness that we're going to be talking about. And it is sad and is negative, but there's hope. We'll get to that.
Yes.
So first of all, in the darkness, why is the US such a scary ally right now? There's a long list, but just a few unfortunate highlights.
It's good to say.
If we think about,
how long do you have?
You guys won't be here all day, I promise. But if we look at the US's treatment of Ukraine, from, for instance, the painful and unpleasant White House visit for Zelensky, how he was treated there, the inconsistent support for Ukraine, what appears to be sometimes support for Russia, that's already a problem.
Yes.
There are the killings of what so far just appear to be fishermen in the Caribbean. There's no evidence to back up the US government's claims that they were drug smugglers. This in the run-up to the kidnapping of Venezuelan President Maduro, which is a violation of international law and sets a really terrible precedent for other things, even if he was a horrible person.
Yes.
And then recently this weekend, and I'm probably going to get a little bit emotional and worked up about this, but the 2 ICE murders in the US, and I'm going to call them murders because all of the evidence available suggests that these protesters in Minnesota had no reason to need to be shot and killed, and there is no accountability coming from the people involved. This is scary because if the US government is willing to murder its own citizens in public, deny that anything bad happened, and then demonize these people as domestic terrorists, what are they going to do to people in other countries who aren't Americans?
First of all, they could use their Cloud Act to compel any American service providers to hand over data, even if it's stored on EU servers, which is a big breach of our regulation, which is a big risk.
Yeah, it's a big risk. And so, for instance, we have this in the Netherlands right now, where there's DigID is a key portal and tool for citizens to access different government data, student loans, pensions, healthcare, etc. And an American company is talking about buying them. And right now there's understandably a lot of resistance for this reason. And who knows if things would just be turned off entirely, right?
Yes.
My theory is that it is more likely to be a bit of a slow burn.
Yeah, in my head, it's like a staring down contest, because I don't expect a switch off, a brutal one. Also because, let's be honest, the US still has an interest in actually keeping the European market. I mean, those big tech companies do need European consumers as well for their services. So if you cut that off, that would be pretty crippling for them, for the growth. So I don't think it's going to be a big switch off, although I'm not super reassured by the president right now. But I do expect that this is far from over, and it's going to be a big power move after power move.
Yeah. What I'm worried about is right now less even the power moves in this stare down and more on targeting of individuals. So for example, the International Criminal Court based in The Hague in the Netherlands, they opened up investigations into Netanyahu, the Israeli leader. And these were investigations. So it wasn't a conviction or anything like that, but they did open investigations. And some judges and prosecutors have been subject to crippling sanctions from the US. They've been cut off from Amazon, Microsoft, credit cards. Prosecutor was French, even suddenly found out that a booking he made for a hotel in France using Expedia was suddenly cut off and canceled because he was on these sanction lists. These people can't even access their email right now.
Yeah.
So, and that's just targeting individuals. There's a nonprofit in the Netherlands called Justice for Prosperity that has indicated it has received reports that the US government is making a list of people involved in things like content moderation, anti-disinformation, the Digital Services Act, to put them on a no entry list. And then we actually had last week, it was a French government official, a judge, I believe, who reported that some US diplomats had started putting pressure on her and asking about how they could interfere with the criminal case against Marine Le Pen.
Actually, I haven't seen that. I've seen all of the news about Thierry Breton and his visa refusal, but I haven't seen that about Marine Le Pen.
Yeah. So there's political interference.
Shocker.
There's Thierry Breton, who's from the European Commission, who was a key architect of the Digital Services
Yes.
Act, and has really been pushing on this anti-difference information stuff, who's now been barred from entry to the US.
Yes.
And these things could escalate to look more like the sanctions placed on the ICC
Yes.
judges and lawyers that I talked about. So this is, not good.
No, this is not great. And if you add to that the economic part, the fact that we spend a lot actually in Europe in terms of purchases for cloud and software services, this is huge. From what I have, I think it's from Eurostat, the spending from European companies is directly supporting nearly 1.95 million jobs and generates 323 billion in value added within the US economy. So those are huge investments that we're not putting into Europe.
Yeah. And that's not necessarily bad, because with trade, you have things going in and things going out, but it fuels the dependency.
It does.
Yeah. And then a couple of other things in the darkness before we get to the light. So
promise, we will come to the light.
We will. It will sound nicer.
Yeah, it's pretty bleak right now.
It's very bleak. It's very bleak. US companies, like I said, they're not inherently the bad guys, except for Meta. They are the bad guys, without question. Guess I'm never getting a job at Meta. A lot of these US companies are claiming to have sovereign solutions. Microsoft last year launched their sovereign cloud solution, marketed that. But because of things like the Cloud Act, they're not actually sovereign. And then Amazon actually recently just announced their European sovereign cloud. And they've talked about things being encrypted and local servers, but cloud services you generally want them close to you anyways.
Yes.
And you want them encrypted. And the director of this unit had an interview in a Dutch newspaper, the NRC. And I read that interview and I felt like it was a disaster, because she couldn't answer a lot of the questions from the journalist in a straightforward way. She had to dance around, because the journalist went straight to the sovereignty stuff. Okay, you're selling sovereignty.
Good journalist.
What makes it actually sovereign? And the answers were not good. And finally, the journalist just said, okay, if we're talking about control, it's relevant to know who is managing the European managers and the European board and any other senior people. Can Amazon in the US fire anybody based in Europe? Do they determine their salaries and their bonuses?
Yeah.
And the director of Amazon here said, I'm not the best person to answer that question. I'll have to get back to you. And they did not get back to the journalist. Now, again, this doesn't make Amazon or this person a bad person, but it just means that they can't fully answer that question around European sovereignty.
No, and I think that's why right now everyone is saying, okay, this matters a lot because of the increased risk. I mean, some of this is not exactly new. So there are gaps that we were aware of in terms of innovation, in terms of funding, in terms even of infrastructure, because we also know that today, even if we have cloud solutions, even if we have semiconductors, which are really the backbone right now for everything, we also know that we don't have exactly the right kind of infrastructure, either like the data centers, the powered compute and everything that would allow us to just get to the level of the US ones right now.
Yeah, because we don't actually have alternatives that are at that level for some of these things.
No, not yet.
And then there's the other thing. So you have some companies that are trying to make it work in Europe with, mostly marketing spin, if I'm being honest.
Spoken as a marketer.
Yeah. But then you other have companies that might just threaten to leave or turn things off. So Hugo, who I interviewed last week about his new Substack alternative, RightEasy, on his own blog, eventuallymaking.io, he actually had a interesting blog post about Cloudflare that I highly recommend reading because he talks about what this means for tech dependency. The short story is that Italy fined Cloudflare for violating laws because it was not taking down piracy websites.
Yes.
Cloudflare has pushed back on this with some fair reasons and some kind of nonsense reasons. And just for context, Cloudflare provides kind of the infrastructure for websites to be online.
I mean, if you listen to us, you know that because we talked about the Cloudflare outage that basically put us on hold for a lot of things.
Yeah, we did talk about that. So that's the short version of what Cloudflare does. They disagreed with Italy. They didn't want to pay the fine, and they're right now kind of threatening to just leave Italy, which could actually be quite crippling because Cloudflare is the player. Everybody uses them for good reason. They're really good.
Yes.
But it also makes it difficult for governments to enforce their laws if powerful tech players are too big to fine, essentially. And then, of course, you have the social media platforms, Meta, TikTok, LinkedIn, and X. These are all shaping public discourse.
Yes.
These organizations decide what information gets amplified, what information gets suppressed. We already know through a lot of research that right-wing disinformation does particularly well on most of these platforms.
Yes, with those platforms.
And that influences the democracy. So it's a tough time.
Yes, but promise, it's not all doom and gloom.
And now it's time for the light.
We do have some strength in Europe.
Yes. Before we get to that strength, I kind of want to talk about some interesting leadership changes, or changes in leadership behavior, I should say, that do this. So for those of you that will be watching the YouTube stream, that are not watching the YouTube stream, I am putting on a pair of shiny aviators, just like President Macron of France during Davos. We're heading into the light, guys.
That's why you need the sunglasses.
That's why you need the aviators.
The future is bright.
The future is bright. I'm trying to be optimistic here. I was very depressed after the ICE murders this weekend. I'm laughing through the pain. So the first take, the thing to know is that crises suck. They're terrible. They're difficult. You prefer not to be in them.
Yes.
But a shared crisis does a few things that are very useful for communities, for societies, for democracies.
Yes.
They shine a light on cowardice, because in a crisis, you see who is brave and who is a coward. So they shine a light on cowardice, and you need to know that. They reward courage. The people that are willing to be courageous, you will see them, and they will have a chance to really shine. And they fuel creativity, because people have to come up with new ways and different ways of solving problems.
They also tend to bring people together that, in the face of a bigger threat or bigger risk, can, at least for a time, overcome their differences to actually say, okay, let's deal with this first, and let's do it together and pull together strengths. Then we can go back to why we're not exactly aligned on everything.
Exactly.
So you have a lot of European leaders right now actually coming together to say, all right, there's been a lot of talk. Now it's time to actually get shit down, you know?
Yeah. And the reason I'm putting these glasses on is because I felt that Macron had a good showing at Davos. You need to look up his speech on YouTube, because he is wearing these big blingy aviators during his speech.
There's been so much commentary on that.
Yeah, it is. And the company that makes the glasses apparently had a bit of a stock surge.
Yes.
And his vibe is very much, it's a combination of, I don't give a shit anymore, but also like, we need to really turn things around here. Lovine, as the French person, give us a breakdown.
All right. So my first reaction, because I watched the video, I didn't listen to the speech. I watched the video, and
I did too.
When I saw him, I was like, "What is it, Top Gun? Are you kidding me?" So my first gut reaction was like, "Oh, come on!" But then I actually listened, and I was like, "All right, not too bad." Because this was, I think, to be honest, I preferred the Macron is.
We'll get to that one in a
Yes.
second. I'm going to pretend I'm Canadian for a moment after you're
same.
done talking about Macron.
But actually, Macron's speech was around the same line, just not as open about it. But on the fact that we need to recognize now that there's a big shift. International relations are changing fast, and they're changing hard. And we need to challenge what we thought were the rules of international trade and diplomacy and global economics. And what does that mean for us? And what does that mean to make some hard choices to head into a different kind of future? Yeah. But I think this was real, which I liked. It was not like, let's fake the fact. Let's fake it and say that we're all friends and everything is going well. No, it's not fine. It's not going well. But now, what do we do about it? Because we have a choice to make. So, all in all, I think it was not too bad.
It wasn't. And he actually did the whole thing in English, which is very rare for a French leader to do.
Free talk English. Speak English.
I wouldn't have been offended if he did it in France. Like, there are translators, and that's fine. I did it in French. Sorry, but he did it in English. So it was a good speech. He was holding it in a little bit because I think he was more outspoken than other European leaders. I think some of them are scared. Yes. Others are trying to buy time. He was more practical, but still held back.
To be very transparent, there's been a lot of commentary in France about the glasses as well, saying, did you ruin the whole thing with that accessory, or?
No, the glasses were an enhancement. The glasses were an enhancement. That's my take on this.
It's not the sentiment in France for everyone.
It worked for me. Which is why I'm wearing my aviators now. But the profile and courage for me goes to Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada. You really need to watch his speech if you haven't. He starts out with a metaphor from, if I recall correctly, a story told by a Czech dissident.
Yes.
About, and then later on, a president of the Czech Republic talking about under communism how there's an illusion about how the world is, even though everyone knows it's not that way. And if a greengrocer suddenly takes their sign down around workers of the world unite because they know it's a lie, and it's a lie to keep everybody afraid, it makes it a little bit safer for everybody else to acknowledge the lie and work on building in the world as it is and for the world they want, rather than living in a world that doesn't exist and that keeps everybody afraid.
Yeah, it was very much about what does it cost us to keep the charade. Yeah. And do we want to?
Yeah. And then he directly translated that to what he referred to as American hegemony and power and coercion. But his willingness to say these things out loud so forcefully, especially when Canada is economically so dependent on the U.S., something like 70 or 80%. Yeah. Set the tone, and I think gave other people more permission to also speak out a little bit, which was quite good. Now, again, geopolitics instead of tech, but we need to acknowledge this because this moves things forward towards where it changes.
Yes, and it is very much tied to also the tech strategy as well, because he was also talking about the fact that even if it's a very unreliable partner right now, the US, you can't also say that you're going to completely do without. So it was also being very pragmatic about the fact that we need to think about alternatives and the power dynamics without threatening to shut everything down. And it's more about what kind of solutions can we find to rebalance and to rethink that. And for technical sovereignty, this is kind of the consensus for analysts that it doesn't mean total independence, technical independence from US providers. It doesn't mean that we're going to stop altogether, but it does mean reducing the reliance, finding other alternatives, having maybe bigger partners, maybe with Canada, maybe a little bit in China, maybe in other parts of Asia, but to make sure that we don't have one partner that is able to actually cripple us completely. So how do we get there?
Yeah, it's a question of dependency. And one of the things I thought about is also, it's better if things feel like a real partnership.
Mm-hmm.
And a real partnership to me means that you're also in a position to tell your friend when they're being an ass.
Yes.
And right now, America is a friend of Europe who is being a bit of an ass. And if you have a little bit more authority, you might be able to push back on that. That's the hope.
Yes. So if we were to try and push back on that, what do we need? What does Europe need right now to reduce the dependencies and to rebalance the power dynamics? How do we get there? That's basically the talk right now.
Yeah. So, and this is part of that light still. So now we've had the courage and the willingness to call things out. Now, what do we have? So the first thing at the top is stuff that on the tech side, that's where we're focusing today. Where are we actually really, really good? And there's a couple of players that stand out. So the first one is ASML, the Dutch chip maker. No one is anywhere near as good as they are. They are world leading and nothing else comes close. So this is at the very top. There's not a lot of other European innovators and providers that do stuff. This is right up there. And then you have a few other things that are actually quite strong. So for instance, you have in the financial technology space, you have Adyen and Molly, both Dutch-based companies that are strong and in many ways better competitors than American fintech companies. So there's reduced dependency there. Fun fact about this, a bunch of the coffee shops in the Netherlands that sell weed have suddenly found that they're losing their ability to process payments from American payment providers. And the CEO, Adrian Mol of Molly, he should put on some aviators too for this, has announced that they are going to make sure the coffee shops can sell their weed without getting hindered. Sovereignty, baby. So these are a couple of examples that come to me of really strong European options. Another one I just started my own account is actually Proton. So, yeah. So it's a Swiss-based email server. They have a simple free version, and then you can pay for it as well if you want. And I quite like it so far.
And then you have some alternatives also to some of the hyperscalers. They're not huge yet, but they have good potential. So in terms of cloud infrastructure, for example, you have a couple of good names because you have OVH Cloud in France, you have Scaleway in France as well, but you also have Yonos in Germany or Dutch Telecom. And so we have a couple of alternatives already that just need more funding. And for Europe to actually also invest in the infrastructure, the hard ones, the data centers and such, and the energy structure, that will help power the growth as well. Because there are good alternatives today.
Yeah. And if anybody's listening is wondering about other alternatives, and as you've heard us talk, some of them are just obviously very good choices where you don't take any sacrifices, and other ones you kind of need to take a bit of a hit to give it a chance to grow, if I'm being honest. But there is an organization called Eurostack that they have created a framework on kind of creating regulation around digital procurement in Europe and how to create more autonomy. And they have a whole website, which is a directory that they call Trusted Tools for Digital Sovereignty. And this is a combination of open source and European tools. Additionally, just for the dependency, there is a lot more opportunity than people think because the basics are there. So either a crisis forces these basics to be used and then they get a chance to thrive, or we manage to avoid the crisis and the government just tries nudging it so things become more balanced. And this does not mean that Google, Microsoft, and Amazon and all the other tech players go away. It just means that there's more options out there. There's more competition. This is good for everybody.
There's also willingness from Europe to invest more. So there's been a couple of initiatives and announcements in the past year or so and programs to actually fund some of the infrastructure. So you have the EU Chips Act. You've had initiatives like Gaia X. You have an initiative that you mentioned recently, the 28th regime, that is getting some traction right now.
Yeah,
as
so
well.
I was shocked when this happened because so when we talked about this, we talked about the 20th regime and it sounds like some evil dictator in a sci-fi book. It has now been rebranded to EU Inc.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going pretty fast. I thought it was going to be one of those European Commission things where they have a meeting to have a meeting about having a meeting.
Yeah.
But it seems to be moving along and it's big. It's still in the early
Yes.
days. They have to figure out how this works, but it would allow somebody to set up their company as a European entity instead of in just one country. There's potential for European kind of financial exchange. So it wouldn't just be a country-specific stock exchange, but a European one. So that's great for the investment climate. It strengthens the euro.
And that's good also because we know that part of what has stalled the progress of some of those previous initiatives that we mentioned is also the fact that you have to reunite 27 members with very different contexts. So typically Gaia X, it's one of the main reasons of this not...
Hold on. So what is Gaia X for those that don't know?
All right. Gaia X is an initiative for data infrastructure, like a federated European initiative to create like a standard to make sure that we have federated data systems and infrastructure and trusted one. So there's a bunch of standards to build, rules and such. And in theory, this is a good initiative. This could really help also streamlining the exchange of data in trusted environment and good processes for Europe. But actually agreeing on how do we go about it, what are the standards, is very difficult when you have 27 members.
Yeah, and I feel like this is a good reflection of the old way. So this is kind of the negative things that happen when there's not a crisis. And now that there's a crisis, the tone is shifting. And the question is, how do we move? How do we get things done? How do we compromise? And it won't be perfect.
No, and some things are very long-term. We also know that this is not going to be achieved overnight. We're talking about decade, at least. But there's also some quick wins, some things at least that also show the intention. How serious are we? So there's been talk also at a Berlin summit in November between France and Germany to go for European preference in some of the procurement processes, namely for the public sector, which is one of Europe's largest digital services purchaser anyway, and redirecting that spending to European providers. Imagine the lift that would give some of those companies that we mentioned before if we put that in place quickly enough.
Yeah, it would be huge.
Yes.
And it makes me think of actually something Macron said in his speech. Sorry, now that I have my aviators on, I keep thinking about him.
All about Macron now.
I'm all about Macron now. But but one of the things he talked about in his speech was that, free trade is not always super free everywhere. The EU has really open free trade. And once you're in, it's actually disadvantageous towards European players, even in that free trade. Whereas in the US and China, there's a lot of local favoring and protectionism.
Yes.
And this is just kind of a way of trying to balance that out.
And if we keep with the French initiatives, because we've had a good one also announced today. So
yeah, today, just a few hours before recording.
Just before the recording. And kudos to you because I hadn't seen that yet. France just announced a new initiative basically aimed at identifying first and then reducing Europe's dependence on US and Chinese technology suppliers. So there's two things. Basically, you have an observatory, which is meant to audit everything and assess the level of dependence. And then you have an index, a digital resilience index, which is meant to score then how resilient would we be and how much progress have we done in actually reducing. So it's not just about intentions and well wishes. It's actually about taking actions and seeing the progress to make sure that we can sustain some of the threats.
Yeah.
So kudos.
That's a good move and very fast. And I hope it sets a precedent for other policy moves.
I hope so too.
My hope is that obviously the US starts to come to its senses and its descent into what right now looks a little bit like fascism stops. But to finish with the light, I think there's a positive way forward for everybody in this.
Yes.
Because future sovereignty looks like a partnership where Europe and the US and other democratic nations are partners who are operating much more from a principle of global fairness because multiple people are a little bit more powerful. Carney highlighted some of the shortcomings of the old system. This setup also actually helps to better insulate Americans from future autocratic moves, I think, because there's just less multinational leverage the U.S. can exert, which results in actually more internal security and stability. And there's just a lot of really, on the tech side, which plays such a huge role here, there's a lot of really good stuff here. There's a lot of great European companies that can, innovate and challenge and change things. And I think that will be quite good.
Actually, good talent as well.
And a lot of really good talent. And hopefully under EU Inc., a lot of that talent that has actually gone to the US will be interested in coming back to Europe.
It was one of the calls from Macron, actually, at the end of the speech, like, you know what? You're welcome here if you want to come back.
We've got democracy over here.
Yes. Shiny new thing.
Shiny new thing. It'll be back in America. It's still there. It's still there. Yes. It's holding on.
Yes. So, a lot of things to consider. And so, not a very optimistic portrait, but not a terrible one either. But I'm really curious to see how this pans out in the upcoming months and year. I am a little bit more optimistic, actually, than when we recorded the cloud sovereignty episode, because I could feel the shift between all of my notes for that recording, all of the research before Davos and before the latest events. And now I see a shift in, we're actually having talks now that are very pragmatic about, great, let's get to business now. It's not an option anymore.
Yeah. People are really willing to put in the work and do the hard things to make it happen.
Yes.
So I'm very much looking forward to this. And to my American friends who are still in the US, you can do this.
Hang in there.
Keep protesting, keep voting. And,
fingers crossed.
We're still friends.
Yes. Depends on who you vote for.
And we'll be right back with our Moment of Nerd. Every episode, we have a Moment of Nerd where we share things that we have watched, read, or listened to that make our nerdy little hearts go pitter-patter.
Yes.
And Laurine, I've discovered something about you. But as a teaser, before we get into sharing that discovery, I'll share mine because it's short.
Go ahead.
Harry Styles, one of the world's best dressers, by the way.
By far.
Man, his fashion game is so good. He has recently released a new single called Aperture, and it is so good.
Really?
So good. It's incredible.
I need to listen.
You need to listen to it. It's so good.
I will.
Anyway, that was mine. It was short, but over to you. So, Laurine, we've been doing this show for a while.
Yes.
And I recently discovered that you read between 50 and 100 books a year. So
that's actually Lola. I read 46 last year. But yeah, you shouted at me on Slack, basically. You wrote in all capital letters. And I was like, why?
You read this many books and I am not getting a book for the Moment of Nerd every single week.
Too many to choose from. So, yeah, I read a lot.
So what's your Moment of Nerd?
So, actually, one of my favorite ones from last year, I read like during the last days of December, and it's called "This Is How You Lose the Time War."
I saw that in the bookshop and I almost bought it. Was it good?
Yes, it is.
I love the title already.
Yes, I love the titles, and I saw that on a bunch of accounts that I follow, for recommendations. And this is basically science fiction, but science fiction is really in the background. Don't expect like big battles and such. But it's basically about a war where you have two different armies with agents that time travel to shift just a few details in a tiny event, something very subtle that will change the course of history at some point. And that will
Don't tell me anything else. Don't tell me anything
Yes.
else. I don't want a spoiler.
No, I won't go into too many of the details.
All right.
I promise.
It's on the list.
It's on the list. I'm very curious to hear what you think about it, because what I loved the most about it, I think, was the language. It's very poetic, actually, for science fiction. And yeah,
Interesting.
I read that in a day. That was so good.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah,
Noted.
here you go. I will tell you once I have another book to recommend. I've read 6
very
so
good.
far since January 1st.
Oh my God. I've read 2 and I thought I was doing good.
They were short ones.
Well, sounds like you should be wearing aviators next episode.
Maybe I will.
That was the show. Thanks everybody for listening.
And if you like the show, don't forget to leave us a rating on the platform of your choice and share with your friends, colleagues, everyone.
Yes, spread the love. Thanks everybody and see you next time.
Bye.